It all began when I moved into a cozy two-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city last spring, fresh out of a bad breakup and eager for a new start, so I found my roommate, let's call her Jenna, through a mutual friend who swore she was the most chill person ever. And at first, she seemed perfect. Always tidying up, sharing her killer coffee blends, and hosting low-key game nights that made the place feel like home. Jenna was a graphic designer like me, so we bonded over late-night sketches and freelance horror stories, laughing about clients who thought just one more change was a mantra, and within weeks, we were syncing our schedules, splitting groceries, and even borrowing each other's clothes for dates. Then came her boyfriend, Alex. He showed up one evening with takeout from our favorite Thai spot, all charming smiles and easy banter, the kind of guy who remembered your birthday after hearing it once and fixed the leaky faucet without being asked, and I thought, wow, Jenna hit the jackpot. They'd been dating for about 6 months, met through a dating app, and he worked as a sales rep for some tech company, always dressed sharp, driving a sleek black sedan that screamed success. But something nagged at me early on. Little things like how he'd dodge questions about his family, or past jobs, or the way his phone buzzed incessantly at odd hours, which he'd silence with a quick excuse about work emergencies. I brushed it off as my own paranoia from my ex's lies, telling myself not to meddle in their happiness. Especially since Jenna glowed around him, planning weekend getaways and whispering about future rings. One rainy afternoon, while Jenna was at a client meeting, Alex stopped by to wait for her, and we ended up chatting over coffee. He seemed genuine, sharing stories about his travels to Europe, but when I casually asked about his hometown, he changed the subject abruptly, leaving me with an uneasy vibe I couldn't shake. That night, curiosity got the better of me. I did a quick online search on his name, expecting nothing more than a LinkedIn profile, but what popped up was a mugshot from 3 years ago, an arrest record for embezzlement at his previous job, something about falsifying expense reports and pocketing company funds, and though the charges were dropped after a plea deal, it included probation and restitution sum payments. My heart sank. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, debating whether to tell Jenna or let it slide, but as her roommate and friend, I couldn't ignore it. Secrets like that had wrecked my last relationship, and I didn't want her blindsided. When she got home, bubbly from a successful pitch, I sat her down in the living room, the TV muted on some reality show, and gently broke the news. Hey, I looked up Alex online. Don't be mad. But I found something you should know. He was arrested a few years back for embezzlement. Her face went from confusion to shock, eyes widening as I showed her the article on my phone, explaining it wasn't a conviction but still a red flag worth discussing. At first, she seemed grateful, hugging me and saying she'd talked to him about it, admitting she'd sensed he was holding back on his past, but hadn't pushed. We spent the evening dissecting it over wine, her venting about trust issues from her own ex, and me reassuring her that confronting it early could strengthen things. But the next morning, everything shifted. Jenna was distant over breakfast, barely responding to my questions about how she slept, and when Alex arrived later that day, they huddled in her room for hours, voices muffled but tense. I heard snippets. My name mentioned, words like snooping, and jealous, and when they emerged, Jenna shot me a cold look, announcing they were going out for dinner alone. That night, she confronted me in the kitchen, arms crossed, accusing me of invading her privacy and stirring drama because I was bitter about being single. I defended myself, insisting I was just looking out for her, but she twisted it, claiming I'd always been judgmental of her choices, from her job to her clothes, and now this was the final straw. Hurt and confused, I retreated to my room, replaying the conversation, wondering how my good intentions had backfired so spectacularly. Over the next few days, the apartment turned icy. Jenna started locking her door, hiding her snacks in her mini fridge, and making passive-aggressive comments about boundaries whenever we crossed paths. Alex became a fixture, staying over more nights, his presence a constant reminder of the rift, and I noticed him giving me smug glances, like he'd won some unspoken battle. Work suffered. I couldn't focus on designs, my mind looping on the betrayal, and friends advised me to move out, but the lease locked us in for another 8 months. One evening, after a particularly snide remark from Jenna about my detective skills, I snapped back, reminding her I'd only wanted to protect her, but she yelled that I was the one who needed protection from my own nosiness. Tears stung as I stormed off, realizing our friendship was fracturing, and worse, she was choosing him over me without even verifying the truth. The following week, things escalated when I overheard them plotting to deal with the roommate problem, whispering about subletting or forcing me out, and paranoia set in, locks changed on shared cabinets. My mail rifled through, subtle sabotage like unplugging my charger overnight so my phone died before work. I started documenting everything in a journal. Screenshots of tense texts where she demanded I mind my own business, and even considered confronting Alex directly, but fear held me back. What if he was more dangerous than the record suggested? Meanwhile, Jenna's behavior grew erratic. She'd blast music late at night, knowing I had early meetings, or accidentally spill coffee on my sketchbook, apologizing with a smirk that said otherwise. Our mutual friends noticed the tension at a group hangout, pulling me aside to ask what happened. And when I explained, some sided with me, calling her reaction overblown, while others urged reconciliation. But deep down, I knew the damage was done. The roommate I trusted had morphed into an adversary, all because I dared to warn her about a man with a hidden past. As months dragged on, the apartment felt like a war zone, every interaction laced with suspicion, and I began apartment hunting in secret, dreaming of escape while dreading the confrontation that would come. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come when Jenna discovered my search history and accused me of abandoning her, flipping the script to make me the villain in her twisted narrative. Through it all, I held on to the truth. I'd spoken up out of care, but sometimes, loyalty blinds people to the dangers right in front of them, and now I was paying the price for her denial. The tension in the apartment thickened like fog rolling in off the bay, every shared space feeling smaller, every glance loaded with unspoken accusations. Jenna stopped saying good morning, instead breezing past me in the hallway with her earbuds in, pretending I was invisible, while Alex lingered longer each visit, sprawling on the couch like he owned the place, his laughter booming through thin walls whenever they watched movies in her room. I tried to keep my routine normal, morning coffee at the kitchen island, sketching concepts for a big client pitch, evening runs along the river path to clear my head. But the air crackled with hostility, and small sabotages mounted. My favorite mug mysteriously cracked in the dishwasher one day, my protein bars vanished from the pantry only to reappear half-eaten in the trash, and once, my laptop charger cord frayed suspiciously overnight, forcing me to buy a new one at full price the next morning. I documented it all in a private note on my phone, dates, times, photos of the damage, telling myself it was for my own peace of mind, though deep down I knew it might become evidence if things escalated further. Jenna's friends started treating me differently too. At our monthly game night group, which used to rotate between apartments, she hosted the next one and conveniently forgot to invite me until the last minute, then spent the evening whispering with her circle, while shooting me pitying looks whenever I tried to join a conversation. One of them, Mia, pulled me aside in the kitchen and murmured, "Jenna says you're obsessed with her relationship, that you're trying to break them up because you're lonely." The words stung like salt in a fresh cut. I explained calmly that I'd only shared public information out of concern, but Mia shrugged, saying Jenna felt betrayed and that maybe I should give her space. Space. I almost laughed bitterly. In a two-bedroom apartment, space was an illusion, every creak of floorboards announcing someone's presence. Nights grew restless. I'd lie awake listening to their muffled arguments through the wall. Jenna's voice rising in frustration, Alex soothing her with promises that everything would be fine once she moved out. Phrases that made my stomach twist because she was clearly me. I started apartment hunting in earnest, scrolling listings late at night with the screen brightness turned low, bookmarking places just out of my budget but dreaming of a fresh start somewhere quieter, somewhere without locked doors and side-eye glances. One afternoon, while Jenna was at a yoga class, Alex knocked on my bedroom door, something he'd never done before, and asked if we could talk. Wariness prickled my skin, but curiosity won. I let him in, keeping the door wide open. He sat on the edge of my desk chair, elbows on knees, looking almost contrite. "Look," he started. "I get why you looked me up. Old stuff, bad decisions, but I paid everything back. Did my time on probation, turned my life around. Jenna knows all of it now. She asked me straight up, and I told her everything." I nodded slowly, waiting for the but. "The thing is," he continued, "you digging into my past without asking made her feel like you don't trust her judgment. She's hurt, man. Really hurt. Maybe if you apologized, said you overstepped, we could all move past this." His tone was reasonable, almost pleading, but something in his eyes, too steady, too calculated, set off alarms. I told him I wasn't sorry for warning a friend about a potential red flag, that transparency mattered more than comfort, and he sighed dramatically, standing up. "Your call. Just know she's not gonna let this go easy." He left, door clicking shut behind him, and minutes later I heard Jenna come home, their voices low and urgent again. That evening, she cornered me in the bathroom while I brushed my teeth, leaning against the doorframe with arms folded. "Alex told me what you said. You basically called him a criminal to his face." I spat toothpaste into the sink, wiping my mouth before replying. "I told him I wasn't apologizing for caring about you." Her laugh was sharp, humorless. "Caring? This isn't caring. This is control. You think you know better than me about my own boyfriend." The argument spiraled from there. Her accusing me of jealousy because my love life was non-existent, me countering that I'd rather be single than blind to danger, and ended with her slamming her bedroom door so hard a picture frame rattled on the wall. Sleep evaded me again. I lay staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment since I'd shown her that article, wondering if silence would have been kinder, if minding my own business would have preserved the easy friendship we'd built. But regret didn't change facts. The arrest record was real, his evasiveness was real, and now her defensiveness was turning our home into a battlefield. The next morning I woke to find my keys missing from the hook by the door. After 20 frantic minutes searching, I found them in the fridge, tucked behind the milk like a petty prank. Jenna denied touching them when I asked, shrugging with wide-eyed innocence, but the smirk tugging her lips told another story. Paranoia crept in deeper. I started carrying my laptop to work instead of leaving it charging, double locking my bedroom door at night, even installing a cheap camera in the living room under the guise of monitoring package deliveries. Friends urged me to break the lease early, eat the fee, get out before it got uglier, but money was tight after the charger replacement and looming moving costs, so I stayed, gritting my teeth through the Cold War. Work became my refuge. I poured extra hours into client revisions, landing 2 new contracts that promised stability. Something solid to hold on to amid the chaos at home. Yet every evening returning to the apartment felt like stepping into a pressure cooker. Jenna's silent treatment punctuated by sudden outbursts, Alex's lingering presence like an occupying force, the air heavy with resentment I never asked for. One night, after a particularly brutal day of passive-aggressive notes on the fridge, "Please don't use my creamer," "Thanks," scrawled in her looping handwriting, I sat on my bed and cried quietly into a pillow, the sobs muffled so she wouldn't hear. I'd only wanted to protect her, to be the kind of friend who speaks up instead of staying silent like so many do. But now, I was the enemy in my own home, isolated and second-guessing every choice. As weeks stretched into a brittle standoff, I realized the warning hadn't just damaged our friendship, it had awakened something darker in Jenna. A need to defend her choice at all costs, even if it meant rewriting reality to cast me as the villain. And somewhere in that twisted logic, the real danger wasn't just Alex's past. It was how far she'd go to protect the illusion she'd built around him, and how willing she seemed to sacrifice me to keep it intact. The Cold War dragged into its second month with a predictability that made every day feel like Groundhog Day in hell. I woke each morning to the sound of Jenna's alarm blaring through the thin wall at exactly 6:45, followed by the slam of her bathroom door and the hiss of the shower running longer than necessary, as if she were deliberately wasting hot water just to spite me. Breakfast became a solitary affair. I'd eat yogurt standing at the counter while she perched on a stool scrolling her phone, never once looking up, the silence between us louder than any argument. Alex was there almost every night now, his black sedan parked crookedly in the guest spot that used to be mine for visitors, and their laughter would spill under my door like smoke I couldn't escape, punctuated by the occasional sharp word that made me wonder if the cracks in their perfect facade were starting to show. I stopped cooking shared meals. Instead, I kept a mini fridge in my room stocked with pre-made salads and protein shakes, eating quickly and quietly to avoid any accidental hallway collisions. Work offered the only real escape. My client pitch went surprisingly well despite the distractions, landing me a 6-month retainer that finally gave me breathing room financially, enough to start seriously plotting an exit strategy. I met with a realtor one lunch hour, touring a studio apartment 2 neighborhoods over that had good natural light and no shared walls. The thought of sleeping without listening for footsteps in the hall made my chest loosen for the first time in weeks. Back home that evening, though, reality snapped back. I found a note taped to my bedroom door in Jenna's neat handwriting. "Rent is due on the 1st. Don't forget your half of utilities. Thanks." The passive-aggressive politeness grated worse than outright hostility. I paid immediately via app transfer with a curt done, then blocked out the noise by putting on noise-canceling headphones and diving into freelance revisions until my eyes burned. The next escalation came on a Friday night when I returned from drinks with work colleagues. Nothing wild, just 2 beers and laughter that felt foreign after so much tension, and found the living room rearranged. My throw pillows from the couch moved to a corner chair, my coffee table book stacked neatly, but out of reach, and a new framed photo of Jenna and Alex grinning on a beach vacation prominently displayed where my framed print of the city skyline used to be. I stood frozen in the doorway, keys still in hand, as Jenna emerged from her room in yoga pants and a smug half-smile. "Oh, you're home. We needed more space for movie nights." I asked where my print went. She shrugged. "In storage. It didn't really fit the vibe anymore." Rage bubbled up hot and fast. I wanted to scream that this was my home too, that she couldn't just erase my presence, but instead I walked past her, retrieved the print from the hall closet where she'd shoved it behind coats and hung it back up without a word. She watched, arms crossed, then muttered, "You're so dramatic," before disappearing into her room with Alex trailing behind. That night, their music played louder than usual, bass thumping through the floor until 2 a.m. And when I finally banged on the wall in frustration, the volume only increased for another 20 minutes before cutting off abruptly, leaving ringing silence and the unmistakable sound of her giggling. Sleep came in fragments after that. I dreamed of locked doors and missing keys, waking sweaty and disoriented more than once. Saturday morning, I decided enough was enough. I texted our mutual friend who'd introduced us, asking if she knew of any subletters or short-term solutions, explaining the situation without too much detail. She called immediately, voice full of concern. "I had no idea it got this bad. Jenna told everyone you were the one causing drama, that you were jealous of her relationship and started spreading rumors about Alex." The betrayal hit fresh. I told her the truth. The arrest record, the warning, the way Jenna had flipped it into an attack on my character. and she listened quietly before saying she talked to Jenna, tried to mediate. But when I hung up, doubt crept in. Loyalties shift fast when one side controls the narrative, and Jenna had been spinning hers for weeks. That afternoon, the mutual friend group chat lit up with a message from Jenna. A long paragraph about toxic roommate dynamics, how she felt unsafe in her own home because of constant surveillance and judgment, ending with a plea for understanding and space. Several people responded with heart emojis and supportive words. Only one, a quiet guy from game nights, messaged me privately. This doesn't sound like you. What really happened? I sent him a screenshot of the original article I'd shown Jenna, along with a brief timeline, and he replied with a simple, damn, I'm sorry. It was small validation, but it kept me from spiraling completely. Meanwhile, practical problems mounted. The YY password changed without notice, forcing me to ask Jenna for it in a terse text exchange that ended with her replying, changed it for security reasons. New one is in the shared doc. When I checked, the doc had been edited to remove my access to grocery lists and maintenance notes, leaving only a passive note. Please communicate via text for shared expenses. I felt like a tenant in my own apartment, gradually being edged out inch by inch. One evening after a long day, I came home to find Alex alone in the living room, feet up on the coffee table, scrolling his phone. He looked up as I passed and said casually, Jenna's at a friend's. Said to tell you she won't be back till late. I nodded, heading to my room, but he called after me. You know, if you just admitted you were wrong about me, this could all blow over. She misses having her friend back. The offer sounded almost reasonable until I remembered the smug glances, the rearranged furniture, the late-night music torture. I turned slowly. I'm not wrong, and I'm not apologizing for looking out for someone. He chuckled low. Suit yourself, but leases end and new ones start. Think about that. The implied threat hung in the air as I closed my door, heart pounding. I sat on my bed, staring at the growing folder of evidence, photos of moved items, screenshots of notes, timestamps of disturbances, and realized I couldn't wait out the lease anymore. I opened my laptop, refreshed the apartment listings, and applied to 3 places that night, willing to pay whatever break fee it took. Escape wasn't just a fantasy now. It was survival. But as I hit submit on the applications, a new fear settled in. What would Jenna do when she realized I was really leaving? Would she escalate to keep control, or finally let the mask slip entirely? The uncertainty kept me awake long after the apartment fell silent, listening to the building settle around me like it was holding its breath, waiting for the next move in a game I never wanted to play. The apartment felt like a pressure chamber by the time spring rolled around, windows cracked open to let in the city's humid breeze, but doing nothing to ease the suffocating tension that clung to every surface. I had 3 showings lined up for new places that week, each one a tiny beacon of hope, and I spent evenings packing discreetly. Clothes folded into suitcases hidden under my bed, books quietly boxed and labeled storage. Fragile items wrapped in old towels so nothing rattled when I moved them. Jenna noticed immediately, of course. Nothing escaped her radar anymore, and the first sign of her counterattack came in the form of a passive note left on the fridge. Please, stop moving things around. It's disruptive. I ignored it, but the next morning my half of the pantry shelf had been cleared, my jars of peanut butter and boxes of cereal shoved into a corner with a sticky note reading, Your stuff. Take it or trash it? I photographed everything, added it to the growing digital folder labeled Evidence, and texted our landlord about the hostile environment, carefully wording it as a request for lease break advice without accusing anyone outright. He replied sympathetically, but reminded me the lease was binding unless both parties agreed, or there was documented harassment. So I kept documenting, heart pounding every time I heard her key in the lock. Alex's presence became even more constant. He started working from home in our living room most days, laptop open on the coffee table, feet up, taking calls on speakerphone about sales quotas and client meetings that sounded suspiciously vague, his voice carrying through the apartment like he was marking territory. One afternoon I came home early from a client coffee meetup to find him rifling through the hall closet where I'd stashed moving boxes. He froze when he saw me, then flashed that practiced charming smile. Just looking for an extra blanket. Jenna said it's in here somewhere. I didn't believe him for a second. The boxes were clearly labeled with my name, and he'd pulled one halfway out. I stepped forward, closed the door firmly, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, That's my stuff. Please don't touch it. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Whoa, easy. No need to get territorial. The word territorial echoed in my head long after he sauntered back to the couch. It was the same word Jenna had used in the group chat weeks earlier, and I realized they were feeding each other the same script, building a shared narrative where I was the unreasonable intruder in their happy home. That night, Jenna waited until I was in the kitchen making tea before launching her next salvo. She leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, voice low and venomous. I know you're looking for a new place. Planning to sneak out without saying anything? Classy. I set the kettle down carefully. I'm giving proper notice when I find something. I just need to get out of this toxicity. She laughed, short and bitter. Toxicity? You brought that here when you decided to play detective with my boyfriend's life. You think you can just bail and leave me with the broken lease? Think again. The threat hung heavy. I asked what she meant, and she smiled thinly. Landlord likes me better? I've been the one paying on time, keeping things clean. If you break the lease, I'll make sure he knows why. Your instability, your accusations, how you've made the place unlivable. My stomach dropped. She'd already spoken to the landlord behind my back, planting seeds of doubt, turning my escape into potential financial ruin. I spent the next hour on the phone with a tenant rights hotline, voice shaking as I explained the situation, hostile environment, petty sabotage, implied threats. And the advisor confirmed that while emotional harassment was hard to prove without police involvement, consistent documentation could support an early termination if it rose to constructive eviction. Encouraged, I kept packing faster, more methodically, even enlisting a friend to help move boxes to her garage on weekends when Jenna and Alex were out. But Jenna's retaliation escalated in small, cruel ways. She accidentally forwarded my work emails that had come to the shared apartment account to a client, claiming it was a mix-up, though the timing felt too precise. She complained to the building manager about noise from my room at times when I was dead silent, just reading or typing. Once she left the window open during a rainstorm, so water pooled on my side of the living room floor, ruining a stack of my art prints I'd left out to dry. Each incident chipped away at my sanity. I started sleeping with my door barricaded by a chair, jumping at every creak, second-guessing whether the milk in the fridge had been tampered with or if the headache I woke with was from stress or something worse. Friends rallied around me. The quiet guy from game nights offered his couch if I needed a crash pad. And Mia finally messaged privately to apologize for believing Jenna's version at first, admitting she'd seen red flags with Alex too, but hadn't wanted to rock the boat. Their support kept me grounded, reminded me I wasn't losing my mind, that the gaslighting was real and deliberate. One pivotal evening, after I'd secured a new studio lease starting next month, break fee be damned! I sat Jenna down in the living room while Alex was conveniently out running errands. I kept my voice steady, laid out my plan. I'd pay my share through the end of the notice period, coordinate move-out logistics, leave the place spotless. She listened without interrupting, expression unreadable, then said quietly, "You're really doing this? After everything?" I nodded. "I have to. This isn't healthy for either of us." For a moment something flickered in her eyes, regret maybe, or fear, but it vanished quickly, replaced by cold resolve. "Fine. But don't expect me to make it easy. And don't think this ends here. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why you left." The warning chilled me, but I refused to back down. I'd already lost the friendship, the comfort of home, months of peace. What else could she take? As I retreated to my room that night, suitcase zipped and labeled, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The end was in sight, but the final weeks would test every ounce of resolve I had left. Little did I know Jenna had one more card to play. One that would push the conflict beyond petty pranks into something far more dangerous, forcing me to decide just how far I was willing to go to protect myself from the fallout of a warning she never wanted to hear. The final countdown to moving day felt like walking through a minefield in slow motion. Every step measured, every breath held, as the apartment transformed from a shared home into a contested territory where even the air seemed to carry accusations. I had exactly 28 days left on the notice period I'd given the landlord, who'd reluctantly agreed to let me break early after I forwarded him a carefully curated packet of documentation. Photos of rearranged furniture, screenshots of hostile notes, timestamps of late-night disturbances, and a polite but firm email summarizing the escalating hostility that had made the space unlivable. He didn't promise miracles, just said he'd speak to both of us separately and hoped we could resolve it amicably. Words that rang hollow when Jenna intercepted me in the hallway the next morning, eyes narrowed to slits. "You went to the landlord behind my back?" Real mature. I kept my voice level, suitcase handle gripped like a lifeline. I had to. "This isn't sustainable." She stepped closer, voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You think you're the victim here? You started this? You invaded my privacy, judged my relationship, and now you're trying to paint me as the bad guy so you can slink away without consequences?" I didn't engage, didn't defend. I'd learned that arguing only fed her narrative, so I simply nodded once and walked past her to my room, locking the door behind me with a soft click that sounded final. Packing accelerated after that. I worked in bursts when she was out or asleep, taping boxes in silence, labeling them with Sharpie and neat block letters, hiding the growing stack in my closet so she wouldn't have ammunition to claim I was destroying the place. Alex took to hovering whenever Jenna left him alone, once accidentally knocking over a half-packed box of dishes while stretching, shards of ceramic scattering across the floor like broken promises. He apologized with exaggerated concern, offering to sweep it up, but I waved him off, cleaning the mess myself while he watched from the doorway with that same calculated calm that made my skin crawl. The landlord called both of us in for separate meetings. Mine first, in the building office downstairs where the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like trapped insects. I laid out the evidence calmly, voice steady despite the tremor in my hands, and he listened, nodding occasionally, then sighed heavily. "This is messy. I'll talk to Jenna, see if she'll agree to release you early without penalty. But if she fights it, you might be stuck until the lease ends." I thanked him, left feeling half relieved, half doomed, and returned to find Jenna waiting in the living room, arms folded, expression triumphant. "Landlord told me you're trying to get out scot-free. Guess what? I'm not signing anything. You signed the lease, you pay the rent, end of story." The words landed like punches, but I refused to show it. Instead, I went straight to my room, closed the door, and called the tenant hotline again, this time requesting guidance on filing for constructive eviction based on the pattern of harassment. The advisor walked me through the steps, more documentation, a formal letter to the landlord citing the hostile conditions, potential small claims action if needed. And I spent the next 2 nights drafting the letter, citing specific incidents with dates and proof, sending it certified mail so there was a paper trail. Jenna's response was swift and vicious. The next morning I woke to find my bedroom door handle smeared with something sticky. Peanut butter, I realized after sniffing, the cheap kind I kept in the pantry, and a note taped below it. Oops! Must have slipped while making a sandwich. I photographed it, cleaned it with disinfectant, and added it to the folder, my hands shaking with a mix of fury and exhaustion. Friends rallied harder now. The quiet guy from game nights, Milo, started checking in daily, offering to help move boxes or just sit with me over coffee outside the building, so I could breathe fresh air. Mia confessed she'd confronted Jenna privately and been met with tears and accusations that I was obsessed with ruining her happiness. But Mia wasn't buying it anymore. She'd seen Alex's charm crack during a group dinner, the way he snapped at the waiter over a wrong order, the tight grip on Jenna's wrist when she tried to lighten the mood. "Something's off," Mia whispered during a clandestine coffee meetup. "Be careful. He doesn't like losing control." The warning echoed as I returned home that evening to find the power strip in the living room unplugged. My work laptop had been charging there, now dead. And when I plugged it back in, the screen flickered to life, showing my open browser tabs, apartment listings, tenant rights websites, the email chain with the landlord. Someone had been in my room. Heart hammering, I changed every password, enabled 2-factor on everything, and started sleeping with my laptop under my pillow. The final straw came 2 weeks before move out. I returned from a late client call to find the apartment door ajar, lights on, and voices inside. Jenna's raised in anger, Alex's low and menacing. I hesitated in the hallway, phone in hand ready to record, and caught fragments. "Can't let her just walk away. Make sure she pays. Maybe call the cops. Say she threatened you." My blood ran cold. I backed away silently, retreated to the stairwell, and called Milo, voice barely above a whisper. He arrived 20 minutes later with another friend, and together we knocked, entered cautiously, and found the place empty. Jenna and Alex had apparently stepped out for dinner, leaving the door unlocked in their haste. But the conversation replayed in my head all night, turning paranoia into certainty. They weren't just making life difficult. They weren't planning something worse. I spent the remaining days crashing at Milo's couch when possible, moving boxes in small loads under cover of darkness. And finally, on the last day of my notice, I hired professional movers for the heavy stuff while Jenna was at work. When she came home to find the apartment half empty, my room stripped bare except for the furniture we'd bought together, she stood in the doorway, face pale with shock that quickly twisted into rage. "You're really doing this? After everything?" I met her eyes for the first time in weeks, calm now that the end was here. "I warned you about him because I cared. You chose to believe him instead. This is the consequence." She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and walked to her room without another word. I left the keys on the counter with a final note, "Utilities paid through the month. Good luck." The door closed behind me with a soft finality, and as I carried the last box down the stairs, breathing the cool evening air, I felt something shift. Not just the weight of belongings, but the weight of guilt, fear, and misplaced loyalty. The warning I'd given Jenna had cost me a friend, a home, months of peace, but walking away with my integrity intact felt like the only victory possible. And somewhere in the city lights ahead, a new beginning waited. One without locked doors, without sabotage, without the shadow of a man whose past I dared to expose, and a woman who'd chosen denial over truth. Freedom tasted like stale elevator air and the faint smell of fresh paint as I stepped into my new studio apartment, 3 floors above a quiet street lined with coffee shops and secondhand bookstores. The door closing behind me with a solid, satisfying click that echoed the end of a chapter I never wanted to write. The space was small, barely enough room for a bed, a desk, and a tiny kitchenette. But it was mine alone. No shared walls to transmit whispers or laughter. That wasn't meant for me. No locked doors hiding sabotage. No lingering scent of someone else's perfume or cologne reminding me I was an intruder in my own life. I unpacked slowly over the first weekend, hanging the city skyline print Jenna had once banished storage, arranging books on shelves that held only my favorites, setting up my workstation by the single window that caught morning light perfect for sketching without the constant fear of someone unplugging my charger or accidentally spilling coffee across my tablet. The first night I slept deeply, dreamless for the first time in months, waking to birdsong instead of slamming doors or muffled arguments, and the relief was so profound it brought unexpected tears. I sat on the edge of the mattress, hugging my knees, letting them fall without shame because no one was there to witness or weaponize them. Work flowed easier almost immediately. Client revisions came back with praise instead of my usual distracted typos. New inquiries rolled in from referrals who'd heard I was reliable and creative under pressure, and I realized how much mental bandwidth the apartment war had stolen, how every creative spark had been dimmed by constant vigilance. I celebrated quietly, takeout sushi eaten straight from the container on the fire escape, a bottle of cheap sparkling wine that fizzed against the city hum below, and for the first time in forever, I felt the absence of tension as a presence rather than a void. But echoes lingered. Mutual friends still texted cautiously, asking how I was really doing. Some offering awkward apologies for believing Jenna's version at first, others admitting they'd seen cracks in her story but hadn't wanted to choose sides. Milo became a regular fixture, bringing coffee on Sunday mornings, helping hang curtains, listening without judgment when the occasional wave of anger or sadness hit. He never pushed for details about Alex or Jenna, just sat with me on the tiny balcony watching traffic lights change colors, reminding me silently that not every relationship had to end in betrayal. One evening about a month after the move, Mia called with news she'd hesitated to share. Jenna had posted a long, cryptic Instagram story series about cutting toxic people out of your life for your own peace, complete with sunset photos and affirmations about trusting your gut. And in the comments, Alex had left a heart emoji and a proud of you babe. Mia said the tone felt performative, like Jenna was trying to convince herself as much as her followers, and that a few people had privately messaged her asking if I was okay, because the narrative didn't quite add up anymore. I thanked Mia for the update, told her I appreciated the heads up, but asked her not to forward any more screenshots. I'd blocked Jenna and Alex on everything the day I moved out, and the silence had been a gift I didn't want to undo. Still, curiosity nagged on quiet nights. I'd catch myself wondering if Jenna had ever looked up Alex's arrest record again, if the probation details I'd shown her had resurfaced in arguments, if the charm that once blinded her was starting to crack under closer scrutiny. I never searched for them, never checked mutual accounts. The boundary felt sacred now, hard-won and worth protecting. Life rebuilt in small, deliberate ways. I joined a local co-working space 2 days a week, meeting other freelancers who shared war stories about difficult roommates and boundary-crossing partners. Laughing together over coffee about how we'd all learned the same lesson the hard way: trust your instincts, document everything, and leave when the cost of staying outweighs the cost of going. I started running again. Longer routes along the river where the water reflected city lights like scattered stars, each mile stripping away another layer of residual anxiety until my legs burned and my mind cleared. One crisp autumn afternoon, while sorting through old mail forwarded from the old address, I found a forwarded envelope from the landlord, a copy of the lease termination agreement Jenna had finally signed after I'd paid my final utilities and the movers had hauled away the last box. Attached was a short handwritten note from him. Glad this resolved peacefully. Take care. No message from Jenna. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the quiet administrative close of a chapter that had felt anything but peaceful. I filed it away, without rereading, then took the stack of junk mail to the building's recycling bin, feeling the symbolic weight lift with each piece dropped. Months passed in that gentle blur of new routines, client deadlines met early, sketches turning into paid projects, evenings spent reading novels instead of listening for footsteps in the hall, and I began to notice how much lighter my shoulders felt, how laughter came easier, how sleep arrived without a fight. Milo asked me out for dinner one rainy Thursday, nothing formal, just pasta at a corner place we both liked. And when he reached across the table to brush a strand of hair from my face, I didn't flinch. The touch felt kind, uncomplicated, a reminder that not every closeness carried hidden costs. We didn't rush. Talked about books, bad movies, dreams for the future. And when he walked me home, kissed me softly under the awning while rain drummed around us, I realized I'd stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Jenna and Alex faded further into background noise. Occasional updates from friends mentioned they'd moved to a bigger place downtown, that Jenna had landed a dream client, that Alex was still the same charming guy. But the reports came without urgency, without the power to wound anymore. I'd warned her once, paid the price for speaking truth, and walked away with scars that were healing into stories rather than open wounds. The studio apartment, once a refuge born of necessity, became a home. Plants on the windowsill, thriving in the light. Art pinned to the walls, without fear of sabotage. the quiet hum of my own life filling the space where silence used to feel like accusation. And in that quiet, I understood the deepest lesson of all. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is tell them what they don't want to hear, even if it costs you everything in the moment. Because in the end, the truth doesn't need validation to be true. And the people who choose denial over reality will carry their own consequences long after you've moved on to build something real, something yours, something unbroken. Time softened the sharp edges of that old apartment war the way water wears down stone. Slowly, imperceptibly, until one day you realize the jagged pieces no longer cut when you brush against them. My new studio had become a true sanctuary by the second winter. Fairy lights strung across the exposed brick wall casting warm glows over sketchbooks and half-finished canvases. The single window framed with plants that thrived on neglect and morning sun, and the quiet so complete I sometimes forgot how to brace for sudden noises. Milo and I had settled into something steady and unhurried. Dinners that stretched late into evenings. Weekend hikes along trails where the city felt miles away. Lazy Sundays where we read side by side on the couch, with coffee cooling between us. His presence a gentle counterpoint to the chaos I'd left behind. He never asked probing questions about Jenna or Alex unless I brought them up, and when I did, he listened with the same calm attention he gave everything else, never rushing to fix or judge, just holding space until the words ran out, and the silence felt safe again. Work flourished in the freedom of no distractions. The co-working space became a second home where I met collaborators, who turned into real friends. Graphic designers, swapping tips over, shared monitors, writers trading feedback in the lounge, a small circle that gathered for impromptu happy hours where laughter came easy and no one carried hidden agendas. One project in particular, a branding overhaul for a local nonprofit focused on tenant rights, hit close to home. I poured extra hours into it, designing clean, empowering visuals that spoke to people trapped in hostile living situations. And when the executive director thanked me with tears in her eyes, saying the new look would help reach more people who needed help, I felt a quiet vindication. The pain I'd endured had been channeled into something useful, something that might prevent someone else from staying too long in a place that was slowly breaking them. Occasional updates about Jenna filtered through the grapevine. Mia would text sporadically with neutral observations. Jenna had switched jobs to a bigger agency with better pay. She and Alex had adopted a rescue dog named Luna. They'd posted vacation photos from a beach town up north looking happy in that curated way social media demands. I never asked for details, never searched their profiles, but each mention landed softer than the last, like echoes from a room I'd long since left. One spring afternoon, while sorting through old emails to clear space on my inbox, I stumbled across a forwarded message from the landlord dated months earlier. A copy of the final utility reconciliation showing Jenna had paid the last shared bill in full, no disputes, no notes. Attached was a single line from him. All settled. Hope you're doing well in the new place. I stared at it longer than necessary, feeling the last thread of obligation snap cleanly. There was nothing left to owe, no loose ends to tug at guilt or regret. That same week, Milo surprised me with tickets to a small gallery opening downtown, emerging artists, intimate space, the kind of event where conversations happen over cheap wine and genuine curiosity. We wandered the exhibits hand in hand, pausing at a series of photographs documenting urban isolation, empty apartments, half-packed boxes, shadows stretching across bare floors. One image stopped me cold. A woman standing in a doorway, back to the camera, suitcase at her feet, city lights blurring through the window behind her. And for a heartbeat I was back in that hallway, keys in hand, door closing on everything familiar. Milo squeezed my fingers gently. You okay? I nodded, managing a small smile. Just remembering how far I've come. We left early, walked home through streets slick with spring rain, and when we reached my building, he kissed me under the awning like always soft and sure. Upstairs, I opened my sketchbook to a blank page and started drawing. Not the old apartment. Not Jenna's face twisted in anger, but the view from my current window. Rooftops under streetlights, a lone cat on a fire escape. The quiet promise of ordinary nights. The drawing became the start of a new series I called After. Small pieces exploring what comes next when you choose yourself over comfort, truth over silence, forward motion over staying stuck. I posted a few anonymously on an art forum, and the responses trickled in. Messages from strangers saying, "This feels like my story. Thank you for showing the quiet part. I left too, and it still hurts, but seeing this helps." Each one chipped away at the isolation I hadn't realized I'd carried, turning private pain into shared understanding without ever naming names or seeking revenge. Summer arrived with longer days and open windows. Milo and I took a road trip up the coast, windows down, music loud, stopping at roadside stands for peaches and bad coffee, sleeping in cheap motels with scratchy sheets and no agenda beyond waking up together. On the last night, sitting on a driftwood log watching waves crash under moonlight, I told him everything. The warning, the sabotage, the slow realization that Jenna had chosen her version of love over reality, and how walking away had been the hardest and best decision I'd ever made. He listened until the end, then pulled me close. You didn't just survive that. You rebuilt something better. I'm proud of you. The words settled deep, warming places that had stayed cold for too long. Back in the city, life continued its gentle rhythm. Client calls that ended in laughter instead of stress, evenings cooking elaborate dinners, just because we could, quiet mornings where the only sound was coffee brewing and pages turning. Jenna became a footnote, mentioned rarely and without heat. Whatever path she and Alex were on was theirs to walk, consequences included. I no longer wondered if she'd ever see the truth about him, if the charm would fade, or the control would show its teeth. Those questions belonged to her story now, not mine. My days filled with color and possibility, new projects, deeper friendships, a relationship built on trust instead of defense. And in the stillness between them, I understood that the real victory wasn't in being proven right or watching someone else fall. It was in waking up each morning in a space that felt safe, surrounded by people who chose kindness without strings, creating work that mattered, and knowing that even when warnings go unheard and friendships fracture, you can still walk away whole. The scars remain, faint lines across memory, but they no longer define the shape of things. They simply remind me. Speak the truth when it matters, protect your peace when it's threatened, and trust that the life you build afterward will be stronger for having fought to keep it yours. Years folded themselves quietly around the memory of that old apartment until it felt less like a wound and more like a faded photograph tucked in the back of a drawer. Still there, if you looked. But no longer the first thing you saw when you opened your eyes each morning. My studio had long since given way to a 2-bedroom row house on a tree-lined street just outside the city core, bought with a steady savings from freelance contracts that had multiplied over time. The kind of place with a small backyard where herbs grew wild in summer and string lights hung year-round for evenings when Milo and I sat on the porch swing, debating nothing important. We'd married in a simple ceremony 3 summers earlier, close friends on folding chairs in the community garden, vows exchanged under a pergola draped in wisteria, no drama, no hidden agendas, just promises spoken clearly and kept without fanfare. Milo still worked in software consulting, remote most days so he could be home when the kids needed rides or bedtime stories. We had 2 now. Lila, 5 and already drawing fantastical cities on every scrap of paper she found. And Rowan, 3 and obsessed with building block towers taller than himself. Both of them filling the house with noise and chaos and the kind of unconditional love that makes every past hardship feel like necessary groundwork. The warning I'd given Jenna had become one of those stories told rarely, usually late at night when Milo and I lingered over wine after the kids were asleep. The conversation circling back to how far we'd come from those tense hallways and locked doors. I'd stopped wondering about her years ago. Whatever life she'd built with Alex, whether it had crumbled under the weight of unspoken truths or endured through denial, was no longer my burden to carry. But the universe has a way of closing circles when you least expect it. One crisp October afternoon, while scrolling through emails between client calls, a name jumped out from the subject line of a forwarded newsletter: Jenna Carter. New portfolio launch. The sender was an old mutual contact from our graphic design days, someone who'd stayed neutral through the fallout, and now apparently thought enough time had passed to share without choosing sides. I clicked before I could talk myself out of it. The portfolio site was sleek, professional, clean layouts, bold typography, the kind of work Jenna had always dreamed of landing. Buried in the About section was a short bio. After a challenging chapter in my personal life, I rebuilt from the ground up. New city, new perspective, new focus. Grateful for the lessons that taught me who I really am and what I truly deserve. No mention of Alex, no dramatic victim narrative, just a quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. Scrolling further, I found a testimonial section where a former client praised her resilience and professionalism. One line caught my eye. Jenna turned a difficult breakup into fuel for her best work yet. Breakup. The word landed softly, without triumph or pity. Just fact. I closed the tab, sat back in my chair, and let the information settle. Later that evening, while chopping vegetables for dinner, Lila helping by sorting carrot sticks into color-coded piles, I told Milo what I'd seen. He listened while stirring sauce on the stove, then asked the only question that mattered: "How do you feel?" I paused, knife hovering over an onion. Relieved. Not because she's alone, but because she finally chose something for herself. Even if it took years. He nodded, understanding without needing more words, and we finished cooking together. The kids' laughter drifting in from the living room, where they were building an elaborate block city, destined to be knocked down and rebuilt a dozen times before bedtime. The next morning I drafted a short email. Nothing grand, no apologies demanded or offered, just honesty wrapped in brevity. Saw your new portfolio. It's beautiful. I'm glad you're doing work you love. Take care. I hit send before second guessing could stop me, then closed the laptop and went about my day. School drop-off, client revisions, picking up Rowan from preschool where he proudly showed me a finger painting of a rocket ship that looked suspiciously like a carrot with flames. Jenna's reply came 2 days later, simple and unguarded. Thank you, That means more than you know. I'm sorry. For a lot of things. I see it clearly now. Wishing you all the happiness. No excuses, no elaborate explanations, just acknowledgement. I read it twice, felt a small knot in my chest loosen completely, then archived the thread without replying. Some closures don't need more words. They just need to exist. Life kept unfolding in its ordinary, beautiful way. Lila's first school play, where she played a tree and forgot half her lines, but beamed through the curtain call anyway. Rowan's obsession with dinosaurs leading to family museum trips, where we spent hours staring at fossils and whispering theories about extinction. Milo's quiet proposal for a sabbatical, so we could travel as a family the following summer. Maybe to the coast where waves still crashed the same way they did when I first learned to walk away from what hurt me. The old apartment, the sabotage, the cold silences, they existed now as lessons rather than scars. The importance of boundaries drawn early, the courage it takes to speak uncomfortable truths, the freedom that comes when you stop waiting for someone else to see what you already know. I no longer carried anger toward Jenna, nor pity, nor the need to be proven right. She'd walked her path, paid whatever price came with her choices, and arrived at a place where she could finally look back without defensiveness. And I had arrived at mine, surrounded by small hands tugging at my shirt. A partner who chose kindness every day, work that felt meaningful, a home filled with light and laughter, instead of locked doors and suspicion. The warning I'd given all those years ago hadn't saved her from pain, but it had saved me from a life spent second-guessing my instincts, from staying small to keep the peace, from believing that loyalty meant silence in the face of danger. In the end, that was enough. The story didn't need a dramatic reunion or a tearful reconciliation under streetlights. It needed only this. Two women who once shared a space, who hurt each other deeply, who both survived and grew beyond the wreckage. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between past and present, forgiveness settled. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but steadily, like dust after a long storm finally clearing the air. I closed the chapter not with triumph, but with peace. The kind that comes when you've spoken your truth, protected your heart, and trusted the rest to time. The kids called from the backyard, voices bright with discovery. I stepped outside into golden afternoon light, ready for whatever small perfect moment came next, knowing the life I'd fought for was here, whole and entirely my own.